Joining us now, Michael Waldman, president of the Brennan Center for Justice and former chief speechwriter for former President Bill Clinton. Good to see you, Michael. I want to start with this newly released video and what was said about problems with the search warrant. Here that is.
The warrant will be amended slightly, but for all intents and purposes, what they had is what it's going to look like. We wanted to let her facilitate us moving through the building to unlock the gates so that we don't have to breach it, because one way or the other, the records are coming with us today.
It has to be amended, but the records are coming with us today one way or another. Now we see how this was handled. What do you make of it?
Well, the raid by the FBI, very plainly under orders from President Trump of the Fulton County, in other words, Atlanta election office, is a very chilling and very disturbing thing. This is partly in service of all the conspiracy theories that President Trump put forward in 2020. And it is undoubtedly very unnerving and disturbing to the public servants who work there. But even more than that, it seems like it's designed to send a chilling message to election officials from both parties across the country. If we don't like the outcome of an election, we're going to come after you with everything we've got. So even the chaos is part of the message, unfortunately.
So 5 days after that, yesterday, President Trump called for nationalizing elections, even though, as we all know, states have the constitutional authority to do that. What would be the risk in minimizing that role or eliminating it altogether if the feds take over?
Well, you're exactly right. President Trump sort of said the motive out loud. And the Constitution is quite clear. States run elections in our country. Congress has an appropriate role passing legislation. The president has no role. That was on purpose. There's tremendous potential, as we have seen, for abuse if somebody who is willing to misuse the FBI, use the Justice Department to try to hoover up and obtain private and confidential voter records and all these other things, tries to take control of elections. You mentioned the executive order from last March, which said, in effect, you have to produce a passport, not even a birth certificate, but a passport to register to vote using the federal form. That was blocked by a federal court in a lawsuit the Brennan Center helped bring. The courts have made very clear that is not what the Constitution says. Elections are run under the law. We should make sure that every voter who's eligible has a chance to vote without interference from anyone, especially not from the Oval Office.
Senate Majority Leader John Thune did push back today on the idea of nationalizing elections. Here's what he said.
I'm not in favor of federalizing elections. I mean, I think that's a constitutional issue. You got to be a citizen to vote on elections. But there are other things that the Dems had on their proposal to federalize elections, which are really bad outcomes for the country. I'm a big believer in decentralized and distributed power, and I think, it's harder to hack 50 election systems than it is to hack one.
What we've seen, though, is that President Trump does not hesitate to do things that may be, for example, unconstitutional, that some people might suggest are illegal. He is willing to take the court route and then fight again, all the way up to the Supreme Court. So a key question, I think, is there any practical path toward federalizing elections? First of all, without the support of Congress, could they just move in?
You've correctly identified the issue. Congress does have a role. Congress can and should pass national legislation to protect voting rights all across the country, to ban partisan gerrymandering, to restore the full strength of the Voting Rights Act, to assure access to early voting and vote by mail. These are things that Congress has considered in the past, in the recent past, in legislation like the Freedom to Vote Act. Congress is now considering a really misguided piece of voter suppression legislation called the SAVE Act. What it would do is require people, citizens, to produce a passport or birth certificate, effectively, to register to vote using the federal form. And 21 million people, we know, don't have ready access to those documents, and there are many others who would find it really difficult. That's the kind of legislation that's being pushed right now. That's the wrong way for Congress to be involved. So yes, there's an appropriate national role to protect voting rights. States have the first responsibility, But what the Constitution makes very clear is who doesn't have a big role here is the President of the United States, especially if that president is pushing conspiracy theories, saying he wants to do it to benefit his own political party, and much more. This was actually something that James Madison and the others debated quite a lot when they wrote the Constitution. They knew there were risks of voter suppression. They knew there were risks of gerrymandering. They didn't use those words. But the system has been set up to give Congress the appropriate role, but to give voters the greatest protection by action in the states.
Michael Waldman, thank you.